Nowhere in the world could I find a steam canopy tent available like what I wanted, so I decided that I would just set out and make one for myself. I found flexible copper piping, some plastic connector pieces, and survival blankets for the materials. So here we go. First, I'm gonna start creating the arches with the copper piping. I've got my cute little Vera Bradley measuring tape because I have to work in style, measuring out the size of the arches, marking them off where I need to cut them, and boom, little pipe cutter. I've actually never used a pipe cutter before, but it wasn't that hard. So now to create arch number 2. Got to go ahead and get that straightened out as much as possible, measure it up against the other one so I can make sure they're the same size. Mark it and cut it. Not too bad. All right, look at that nice clean cut. Not bad at all. All right, and time to create arch number 3. So these 3 arches are going to be making the frame for the canopy to hold up the survival blanket, which is going to be the material that holds the steam inside of the canopy. Another nice clean cut there. And now I have to make the rails that are going to hold the arches up. I had to figure out how long I want the rails to be on the table. So I'm just going to lay on the table and figure it out that way. Seems like a pretty good method to me. Hey, I couldn't find any kind of instructions online for this or anything, so I am making up this process as I go along and just hoping it works out in the end. And I stepped on that connector piece. Kind of felt like stepping on a Lego. I'm sure those of you with children know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm just measuring these out. And I'm going to cut them in half because I need a connector piece in the middle for the middle arch to plug into. And look, there are no instructions online that I could find to create this thing that I want to create, and I couldn't find anything like it. So I'm just making up this process as I go along, which is why my process probably seems a little haphazard at times, but I think it's going to work out. So I got my frame. And I'm just going to test it out by draping the survival blanket over it. That's actually looking pretty darn good. I'm excited. All right, now it's time to move to my craft room with my coffee. And I'm just going to be using a really strong glue to connect the rails and the connector pieces permanently. I tested them out at my studio by just sticking them in there and letting it loosely hold together so I could make sure it was going to work. Now that I've got them glued, I'm going to drape the survival blanket back over it. I'm actually going to crawl inside the tent so I can just go ahead and use a marker to mark where I want to sew the elastic loops onto the survival blanket. There is my elastic, and I'm just cutting some elastic pieces according to the size I decided I wanted them to be. And I'm going to go ahead and sew them on where I marked with the marker that I want them to go. All right, there are my loops. Pretty exciting. I can go ahead and test it out by running the first rail through the 3 elastic loops. Make sure this is actually working out how I'm hoping it will. And my amazing man just brought me a drink. All right, so looking good. I'm going to go ahead and crawl back into the tent, and I'm going to mark where the elastic loops for the second rail need to go. Go ahead and sew those on just like I did with the first one. And I'm going to, I think I already went ahead and did that here, number 3 as well. So yes, all 3 rows are done. So now I need to sew up the back of the tent. I don't want it just sticking out flat. I want the back end to kind of go down some, so I need to reshape it. So I went ahead and folded it how I want it, and I am marking a triangle that I'm going to be cutting out of it. And this is going to make it so that the survival blanket actually fits over the frame like a canopy and hangs down on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these two pieces together where I cut it to change the shape of the back end of the canopy. And that actually fits how I want, but I want it to be longer. It needs a longer tail. So I'm going to cut a piece off of the other survival blanket. It needs a longer tail so that it can drape over the steamer, so that the steam will stay inside of the canopy. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a second survival blanket, and I'm going to cut the exact same size triangle out of it and sew it up so that it has the same shape to the piece that I'm going to be attaching it to on the back end. And I'm just gonna pin that on so I can test it out and see if it's laying how I want. Putting a table under there that the steamer will normally be on. I actually decided that I wanted to sew them up at a bit of an angle so that it would fall how I want it to. So you can see I'm sticking the pins into the material at an angle, and I'm gonna go ahead and test it out again. Yes, that is falling how I want it to. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew it along where I have it pinned. I'm sewing the two pieces of blanket together. So now it'll all just be one big canopy piece that I can drape over that frame, and then the back end will drape over a little table like the one that I had there. All right, and next I am sewing the fabric for the front part of the canopy tunnel. So this is the fabric that's going to be hanging down, that'll come down over the client's neck as they're laying in there to separate their face from the steam canopy. So I'm using some sheer fabric, some organza fabric. I'm actually going to do 2 layers of it, but I wanted to use a material that would allow just a little bit of that aromatherapy herbal steam to come through, but not too much because I want their face to stay cool. So here's my 2 layers of fabric. Also, because I've got 2 layers of fabric, that way it is not see-through and they have their privacy under the canopy as well, but it'll let out just a little bit. So here is the final product. I've got to test it on the massage table in my studio. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on the table. It fits perfectly. It lays just how I want. Here it is, looking pretty good. I'm really excited about this. I think it's gonna work out. Here's my 2 layers of fabric that will let out just a little bit of that herbal steam for aromatherapy, but it won't let out too much. That way their face and their head can stay cool outside of the tent. I'm gonna put some organic dry rose petals in the herbal basket for the steamer. The steam will go through the herbs and into the tent to create that herbal aromatherapy steam. And I'm just gonna drape it over the little table, and that way the steam basket is away from the client's feet as well for safety reasons. And here it is. Got a comfy contoured pillow at the top, and that is incredibly relaxing. Definitely worth it.